Welcome back, folks, to WrestleRant, where I give my in-depth analysis of all the pay-per-views that I watch on the WWE Network. Over the course of the month of July, I've been reviewing every WWE installment of the Great American Bash pay-per-view, starting with 04, 05, 06, and 07. Today is the final installment of that series with the Great American Bash 2008, hailing from Long Island, New York, and kicking off the show is a Fatal 4-Way WWE Tag Team Championship matchup, pitting the then-champions, WWE Tag Team Champions John Morrison and The Miz from ECW, Finlay and Hornswoggle, also representing ECW, Jesse and Festus, and Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder. So the tag team division at the time I thought was in a pretty good state, considering all three brands had a pretty good feud going on. We had the Legacy / Team Priceless on Raw with Cody Rhodes and Ted DiBiase. On ECW, we had Miz and Morrison, Finlay and Hornswoggle, if you can really call them a tag team. On SmackDown, we had Hawkins and Ryder, Jesse and Festus, and a number of other tag teams as well. So it wasn't as great as it usually was, but the tag team division at the time was in a decent enough state to put together this Fatal 4-Way contest for the tag team titles on this show. So as a whole, I thought this was a fun opening contest. Finlay and Hornswoggle, there's only really so much that you can do with Hornswoggle in a wrestling role. But they had a pretty nice feud going with Miz and Morrison for what it was worth over the tag team titles at the time. It was pretty obvious that they would not win the tag team championships on the show. They were a joke pairing. They were a joke tag team. Same thing with Jesse and Festus. They were a joke tag team as well. I was thoroughly entertained by them as a pairing. I mean, Jesse and Festus always cracked me up. I still laugh to this day whenever I hear the Biscuits and Gravy theme song. It's so freaking hilarious. You can go check that up on YouTube, or actually right here on YouTube if you type it up, Jesse and Festus, Biscuits and Gravy, WWE theme mashup. There's a video on here that mashes up that theme with other classic WWE themes. It's hilarious. But I digress. The matchup as a whole, like I just said, was very good. It was a very fun opening contest, considering who was involved. There were only real two true challengers, true threats to the tag team titles in this contest, being Miz and Morrison and Hawkins and Ryder. I thought they missed the boat with Hawkins and Ryder by not giving them the tag team titles sooner. It was great that they got the tag team titles at all. Highly underrated tag team, in my opinion. Didn't really have the mic skills, but that's why they fit so perfectly in La Familia with Edge, Chavo, Bam Neely, and especially Vicky Guerrero, because all of those people did the talking for them. These guys just did the wrestling. So I was glad they got at least one tag team title run, but in the 2 months that they held the tag team titles, they didn't defend the titles once. And when they eventually did defend the tag team titles, they lost them to Carlito and Primo, never to regain them. So I thought they, like I just said, they missed the opportunity to give the tag team titles to Hawkins and Ryder when their time was hot, when they were a hot pairing, fresh off of the Undertaker thing right after WrestleMania, when the Edge was still, at this point in time, Edge was still feuding with the Undertaker, but he was kind of in a mini feud with Triple H at the time. So they probably should have given them the tag team titles a lot sooner than they did. Probably right after WrestleMania or after Backlash, when they were involved in the frickin' main event of WrestleMania, when they interfered on Edge's behalf in his match against The Undertaker for the world title. But I guess it's better late than never, because the matchup, like I said, was fun. And the tag team title change, it didn't get a big pop, but there were some people in the front row, as you can see, got a pretty good reaction out of it. They gave it a pretty good reaction, seeing how Hawkins and Ryder are from Long Island. So it was a pretty cool, fitting for a moment for them, for Hawkins and Ryder. Probably Ryder's most memorable victory in his career, aside from winning the United States Championship about 3 years later, what he calls his favorite match of his career. But yeah, nice fun opening contest, new WWE Tag Team crowns, and Hawkins and Ryder. So up next, we had a United States Championship matchup, pitting the then-current champion Shelton Benjamin against Matt Hardy. These two had also met, and this pay-per-view, by the way, before I go on here, is a bit different than all the Great American Bash pay-per-views I've reviewed before this, if only because I was a fan at the time. I didn't watch the pay-per-view itself. This was the first time I've seen the entire show in its entirety. But I was a fan at the time. I do remember the build-up. I do remember the matches and feuds leading up to this event. So I can give some insight on that, as opposed to past pay-per-views where I've only watched the event and never never any of the build-up or aftermath. But that being said, though, Benjamin and Hardy met in a Fatal 4-Way contest for the United States Championship on the Fatal 4-Way United States Championship edition, or what the hell am I saying, on the July 4th edition of SmackDown in a Fatal 4th of July contest for the Star Spangled Prize. Matt Hardy came out victorious in that contest. Benjamin would go on to defeat Matt Hardy in a non-title contest a week later in singles competition, leading to this matchup on this show. So for what it was, I thought it was a very good matchup. Matt Hardy is underrated in the ring, in my opinion, as a singles competitor. Shelton Benjamin, he's great. I think we all know that. So those two put on a very good contest over the U.S. Championship. The matchup didn't really have much of a story behind it, so the fans in attendance weren't really they didn't really have any incentive to care about either guy or really care about the contest or the story behind it, because there was really no story relating into this contest. It was just that Benjamin beat the champion, earned a title shot, and was getting his title shot on the show. That was pretty much it. But for what it was, though, I thought it was a very good wrestling contest. Benjamin hits a pay dirt, comes out victorious as a new United States champion, going on to reign as the United States champion for the next, I think, when did he drop the belt? March of 2009. So 6, 7, 8 more months, I think he would hold on to the United States Championship. So it was kind of a monumental title change in that respect. And in terms of Miz and Morrison, I forgot to mention this before, they had held the tag team titles for 8 months. So kind of funny there that they would hold the championships for 8 months and drop them on this show. Benjamin would win his championship on the show, as Mick Foley said on commentary, his first singles title or his first title at all in WWE in about 2 years. So he would win the championship here and go on to hold that title for 8 months. So pretty cool storytelling there, just a brief coincidence, I guess. But even still, good matchup from Benjamin and Hardy, good stuff there. New United States champion crowned in Shelton Benjamin. Underrated matchup in my opinion. So up next we have for the ECW championship, three straight championship matches in a row on this show. We had the then current ECW champion, Mark Henry, defending against Tommy Dreamer, or I almost said Matt Hardy, but that was SummerSlam. Yes, against Tommy Dreamer. Mark Henry was fresh off winning the ECW championship at the Night of Champions pay-per-view 1 month prior. Tommy Dreamer was being built up as a challenger to the ECW title, and going into the show, Tony Atlas was being positioned as the ally of Mark Henry, and Tommy Dreamer had Colin Delaney in his corner, who he had helped get a contract many months prior on ECW. So that was the whole thing going into this contest. It was a decent enough contest for what it was. I'm not going to call it bad. I'm a big fan of Tommy Dreamer, as I am of Mark Henry. But the matchup, I mean, you really think about it, it features two old guys. Mark Henry and Tommy Dreamer were well into their 40s by this point, two veterans in the business, and not two people that really have the best chemistry together. Like I said, not a bad matchup whatsoever. Just paled in comparison to the other matches on the show, in my opinion. But for what it was, though, I thought it was fine for what it was. Tommy Dreamer ended up getting screwed over by Colin Delaney, who was at ringside. It looked terrible, too. You can see Colin Delaney. You could see it coming from a mile away based off the way that he was looking at him. And I don't mean that in the way that they were foreshadowing it like crazy. They didn't foreshadow this at all. I mean, it just basically came out of nowhere. It was a complete swerve, but a very bad swerve at that, because it served no purpose. Colin Delaney, this guy that had no wrestling skills, no abilities whatsoever, had no credibility, just got a contract a few months prior to this, and then he would turn heel on his mentor Tommy Dreamer. You would think logically it would lead to a feud between the two. 2 days later on ECW, Tommy Dreamer would squash Colin Delaney in an Extreme Rules matchup or something like that, and he would never be seen or heard from again. So Colin Delaney was bye-bye after this contest, so I really don't know what purpose that was supposed to serve, aside from protecting Tommy Dreamer in defeat, which I don't really see the point of doing at this point in his career, given how he would not go back to challenge for the ECW championship after this, at least for another year, that is. And that was pretty much it with Tommy Dreamer. He would do nothing for the rest of the year. So really odd booking there to a decent enough matchup. You know, compared to everything else in the show, I would call this a low point. But I mean, in the wide spectrum of things, I mean, individually it's a fine enough matchup. But in the wide spectrum of the entire show, I guess you can kind of consider it a low point. But if that's a low point, then you got to know this is going to be a pretty good show. So up next, we had Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels in just the midst of their awesome feud over the course of 2008, but a month and a half removed from when Jericho turned on Shawn Michaels, turning heel, hitting him right in the eye. So great storytelling in that they were carrying over that storytelling. They were carrying over that story of Jericho targeting the eye of Shawn Michaels a month and a half later, because throughout the entire course of this contest, Jericho repeatedly went after the eye of Shawn Michaels, just beating it, punching it. Lance Gate at ringside, who was the protege of Chris Jericho at the time, kicking Shawn Michaels in the head, targeting that eye of Shawn Michaels. So great stuff here. Shawn Michaels showing absolute helplessness. So great acting and great sportsmanship by Shawn Michaels in this contest. No short of excellence from the Heartbreak Kid, of course. Would never expect anything less. But the matchup was not the show-stealing contest that you would expect from these guys, the show-stealing matchup that you would get from them at Unforgiven, or you got from them at Judgment Day, or you would get from them especially at No Mercy over the World Heavyweight title in that stellar ladder match, which I will hopefully review at some point because I really want to watch that show, specifically for that matchup, but I might have to watch Jericho's DVD because it is on Jericho's DVD, so I just might watch it there. But nevertheless, great stuff here from Shawn Michaels. Jericho would emerge victorious via forfeit. Not even via forfeit, I don't think. It was via referee stoppage after Shawn Michaels had been bleeding so profusely in this contest. And it's funny because I was going into the show thinking, was this the last pay-per-view that was under PG-13 or PG-14 or whatever? So was this the last pay-per-view of that era, or was it the first of the PG era? Because I remember it being the first one under the PG rating. I would end up being wrong after seeing this contest, because Shawn Michaels was bleeding everywhere. His entire face was drenched in blood. It was a great visual, made for great storytelling on Jericho's part, making him look like a vicious heel, and on Shawn Michaels' part, making fans feel sympathetic for the Heartbreak Kid, teasing that his career might be over, because Jericho would come out after the Divas Championship a little later on in the show, saying that people just hold on to your ticket stubs. You just witnessed history. You just witnessed the last matchup of Shawn Michaels. So I thought that was great, and this entire feud was stellar. Easily one of the best feuds in years, one of the best things that either Shawn Michaels or Chris Jericho has ever been involved in. Jericho was so hot as a heel at the time, and I think it would be the next night or 8 days later that he would ditch the whole Y2J persona. He'd grow the beard out. He would ditch the pants and start wearing trunks. It was great stuff on Jericho's part, and it gave him a tremendous amount of heat going into SummerSlam when the two had their whole angle there. So great stuff here. Like I said, not the show-stealing matchup that you would expect from the two, but it didn't need to be that matchup because you would get many more of those contests in the upcoming months. But for what this was, great storytelling, gives Jericho a victory, and makes him look like the most hated man in the entire wrestling industry at the time. So great stuff there. Up next, we get a matchup to be crowned to determine the new inaugural Divas Champion in a matchup pitting Michelle McCool against Natalya. So this matchup was very interesting to look back on, seeing how Michelle McCool was still kind of coming up in the business. I mean, I know she had debuted on WWE TV years prior to this, but she was nothing more than a manager or just eye candy and whatever on the SmackDown brand. So seeing her kind of come into her on her own, as a singles competitor on this show, as well as Natalya. Natalya, I can't really remember exactly when she debuted, but I do know for a fact that this was almost immediately after she debuted, whether it be a month or two, or maybe even a few weeks. I'm not exactly sure. You would never tell, though, because I think she had red hair at the time. She looked nothing like what she looks like now. But even so, though, I mean, it's really funny to see these two in the infancy of their careers, so to speak. And they had a hell of a matchup, too. I mean, for 4 or 6 minutes, however much time this matchup got, it was a pretty good contest. The live crowd didn't really care, and I don't blame them. I mean, it's a Divas Championship. At the time, I had only just started watching, and I thought the title would have been defended at Night of Champions. It ended up being defended at this show instead, but I never really cared for the Divas Championship. I thought it was all about the Women's Championship. I'm not surprised that they kept the Women's Champion, that they ditched the Women's title and kept the Divas title after they unified the belts at Night of Champions 2010. If only because the Divas title looks more new and it's the new fresh face of the Divas division than the Women's division, despite all the lineage that the Women's Championship had. So I wasn't surprised by that, but was never a big Divas title fan. I'm not surprised that the people in attendance on this show weren't really all excited about the theory of having a second Divas title either. Because I know you had 2 different Divas divisions on Raw and SmackDown. I get that, but I don't know. It was just really weird to look back on. I just don't really see what purpose it had. I mean, if you had the Women's Championship, I know they were really strict about having people from Raw stay on their show and people from SmackDown staying on SmackDown. That's great, because I love the brand split. But, I mean, you just have the Women's Champion appear on both shows, much like what they did with the Unified Divas title, a number of years later when they would unify those championships, the Women's and Divas Championships. But even so, though, going back to the matchup itself, I thought it was a great contest. Great stuff from Michelle McCool and Natalya. And interestingly enough, it would be 2.5 years later that Natalya would defeat Michelle McCool, along with Layla, in a handicap tag team matchup in, not New York, I don't remember where it was, but it was at Survivor Series 2010, to win her for Divas Championship. So I don't even know if they touched upon that when they did that whole feud in late 2010. I doubt it. But I just noticed that when I was watching the show, so I thought that was pretty great. Great coincidence. But yeah, after this we get the whole Jericho promo. I already talked about that. So the top 3 main events up next: CM Punk versus Batista for the World Heavyweight Championship. So it was actually really good timing that I watched this show. I watched Batista's DVD, his new DVD. I watched his old one, which is great too. The new one was kind of a disappointment. My full review on the DVD, cheap plug, is up on my website, nextyearwrestling.weebly.com. But one of the matches on his DVD, his newer DVD, is this contest with Punk, and I never really understood why. The matchup, it was good. Punk got offense, as did Batista, obviously, but it really wasn't the best match of either guy's career, for one thing. It was highly forgettable, had a very lame finish with Kane coming in, and I'll get to that in a second, and ending it in a double disqualification of all things. It was really, really weird just to look back on it, and the fact that it was included in Batista's DVD is really mind-boggling. But not only that, though, I had just gotten done watching CM Punk's documentary for a 4th time on Saturday, and having him talk about how the World Championship, his first run with the title, was a complete disgrace of the championship, according to Michael P.S. Hayes, and how it really wasn't what he thought it should be, and being overshadowed by guys like Batista, like John Cena, Shawn Michaels, Rey Mysterio, Chris Jericho, everyone else on that show. It really wasn't all that surprising that his reign was a flop, because they never really had any big plans for him to begin with. I don't know why they just didn't have him cash in and lose. They didn't really have any much plans for him as a world champion. But that being said, though, that kind of, I don't want to say that hindered my interest in this contest, because I already knew what the outcome was going to be anyway. But with that being said, though, I didn't really have much interest in this contest because I knew what the result was. Like I said, the wrestling was good. It wasn't a bad matchup. Definitely was not a great contest. It was a nice showing for Punk, but his entire title reign was a joke, and it's not his fault. It was the way that he was booked. He was booked like an underdog, which is good in some senses, but the guy was being overshadowed on every single show that he was on. Not Night of Champions, I'm sorry. This is his first pay-per-view as champion. On this show, at SummerSlam, at Unforgiven, he didn't even get to defend the damn thing, because he was punted in the head by Randy Orton earlier on that night. So his entire reign was a flop, and this was kind of a prime example of it. If you want a prime example of how Punk's reign flopped, it's matches like this. He got good offense on Batista, but Batista dominated most of the contest. Out comes Kane, attacking Batista, and the referee rings for the bell. So, in theory, if we're going by that, then Batista would have won by disqualification because he was attacked by Kane first, but the referee still deemed it a double DQ for some reason, which is mind-boggling. Kane goes in the ring, chokeslams CM Punk after the contest, after Kane walks away. And this was after Kane was drafted from ECW. They didn't really have much in mind for him at the time. Rey Mysterio had just disappeared from TV. He was holding around the burlap sack. A lot of fans at the time, I mean, I had only just started watching, so I didn't realize this until like many years later, that many people thought it was probably Kane's old mask. It would end up being Rey Mysterio's mask, and that would trigger a feud between the two for the fall of 2008. But with that in mind, though, they were kind of pushing him pretty heavily on the Raw brand during this period of time. So he comes in, takes out both Punk and Batista, and then he leaves the ring. It comes down to CM Punk and Batista in the ring, kind of showing off. Punk holds up his championship belt, and then for no apparent reason, Batista bombs CM Punk, and then leaves the ring. So it was kind of making a mockery of the champion, kind of a joke. And like I just said before, prime example of why CM Punk's title reign as World Heavyweight Champion flopped, because he was so terribly booked. This matchup didn't have a conclusive finish. The next night's title defense against Batista in the rematch did not have a conclusive finish. The only saving grace of this match that I can hardly even think of is the fact that they didn't really give too much away, that if they wanted to do a future feud between the two, that they easily could have. They never did in 2008, 09, or 2010, when they probably could have in 09 when they were both on SmackDown. But even to this day, I know CM Punk is gone, and he's gone, but Batista will be back. CM Punk, we have no idea. I still hold to my beliefs that he will be back. I just don't know when. He just won't be back anytime soon, but he will be back, though. My personal opinion, my 2 cents. But yeah, if he ever comes back, then a CM Punk Batista feud, I think could be great, especially stemming off of Batista's comments on TV a few months ago, seeing how all these cruiserweights, so to speak, are holding the world championship, thinking that they're the best in the world. Logically, that could have set up a feud with Punk, but he never ended up coming back to do that. But seeing how the two are good friends in real life, from what I've heard anyway, that I would love to see a future feud between these two if this matchup was any indication, because they work well together. Just the booking of their respective characters at this point in time, at the time of this show, was just mind-boggling and horrendous. But up next, we get to the parking lot brawl, the New York parking lot brawl between John Bradshaw Layfield and John Cena. So this was one of those feuds that you just wanted to see end as quickly as possible, because not only did they have that lengthy feud in 2005, for some reason or other, because John Cena wasn't contending for the championship in 2008, right after WrestleMania, and they had the whole Triple H and Orton feud instead, they decided to give Cena something to do and to kill some time before the draft, and they put him in another revival of his feud with JBL. It made sense in 2005 because JBL was his top guy on SmackDown and they wanted him to put over John Cena, the next face of the WWE. I understand that, but in 2008, it really didn't serve a purpose. It reminded me a lot of the Big Show Cena feud, to be quite honest with you, because we got that in 2004. Yeah, we got that in 2004. We would get it again in 2009. Again in 2012. So to do the same thing with Cena and JBL didn't really make much sense to me. And then they would take a break from that feud at Night of Champions when Cena contended for the WWE title against Triple H. He would lose that matchup. And even after the draft, even after they switched up the brand and had a fresh, full roster of superstars, they again went back to Cena and JBL on this show. And I'm not complaining. I mean, it was a fun matchup. The brawls backstage are really hit or miss because the people in attendance are basically just sitting there in the crowd watching the brawl go down on the Titantron on the big screen when they're just sitting there watching it all unfold. So that kind of took away from it a little bit, in my opinion. It was a fun brawl, like I said before. Some spots were a bit ridiculous, like JBL lighting the car on fire. Like, what the fuck is that? I mean, that's like attempted murder. That's not like trying to defeat your opponent. And in wrestling, I mean, if we're talking like logically or realistically, a lot of things in wrestling don't make sense, but if you're going to try to kill your opponent, that's attempted murder. That's assault, brother. You just call the police. You know what I mean? So it didn't make any sense. I mean, JBL, I guess within the confines of WWE, you can attempt to murder someone and you wouldn't get arrested for it because you're at least trying to defeat your opponent. Like, it doesn't make any sense at all thinking back on it. But anyway, though, and this is the first time I've seen this matchup, so this is the first time I've seen this. But anyway, though, it was a fun brawl for what it was. I mean, Cena and JBL, their prior two matches weren't really anything all that special. You can check out my review of One Night Stand for my thoughts on their contest in the First Blood matchup. But anyway, though, entertaining brawl between John Cena and JBL. They would go out to the ring, not really to the ring, but in front of the live crowd on the stage. JBL would shove John Cena onto the limo at ringside, not the limo or whatever it was. I think it was a car. JBL would pin John Cena and get the 3 count. So that was pretty surprising. It was about as clean of a win that you can get over John Cena in a parking lot brawl contest. But for what it was a big win for JBL, and it was probably done to set him up to become the #1 contender to the World Heavyweight Championship to CM Punk at the SummerSlam pay-per-view 1 month later. So that made sense in booking-wise. But it's funny, though, because I was watching this show, and I realized that John Cena lost 3 consecutive... he lost clean on 3 consecutive pay-per-views during the summer of 2008. Listen to this. Night of Champions 2008 in June, he would lose to Triple H cleanly for the WWE Championship. He wasn't the champion, but he was challenging for it and lost in their rematch from WrestleMania 22. Fast forward to the Great American Match this show, he loses cleanly to JBL. In a way, I mean, he didn't cheat or anything like that. He just shoved him into a car and got the 3 count. So JBL picks up the victory there. And then at SummerSlam, John Cena would lose cleanly again to Batista. So for 3 consecutive pay-per-views, in this day and age, it's like a fucking miracle if John Cena can lose clean. But in 2008, he lost 3 consecutive pay-per-views cleanly. Granted, not to an up-and-comer. He lost to 3 current stars at the time, or 3 veterans and whatever you want to call them, in Triple H, JBL, and Batista. He didn't lose to a Daniel Bryan or a Ryback or to a CM Punk. He lost to 3 established guys, but they were still 3 clean losses nevertheless. But going back to the matchup itself, I thought the finish was very well done. John Cena getting shoved through the limo. His elbow was bleeding like crazy. Like, it looked terrible. Like, it was all shattered and everything. And like I said before, this was the final pay-per-view held under the PG banner. So this would be the last time that WWE would ever focus on blood in a contest, but to ever get a close-up like they did in the Shawn Michaels Chris Jericho contest. Because I'm thinking, like, if they were PG at this point in time, that then they wouldn't that they wouldn't do that they wouldn't get a close up of Shawn Michaels' eye bleeding or anything like that, or John Cena's elbow bleeding. So this was the final pay-per-view under the PG-14 banner. So it was kind of historic in that sense, and the final pay-per-view that you would see blood at, or probably the final time that you would see see blood in WWE at all, like intentionally. I know we've gotten blood, in recent years from like accidents and stuff like that, or WrestleMania 28 between Undertaker and Triple H, or whatever other matchup, there has been blood in over the last few years. Brock Lesnar bleeding on Raw that one time when he came back in February of 2013. He was bleeding on one side of his face, and it was just dripping down on the ground. Like, I know he was bleeding, but they just didn't focus on it. So this is probably the last time that anyone would ever bleed on a WWE show, and they would get a close-up or, focus in on it or tell a story on commentary about the blood in the matchup. So I thought that was interesting. But JBL, your victor here. We get to the main event between Triple H and Edge for the WWE Championship. I thought it was a solid matchup, if not just... I thought it was a solid yet unspectacular contest from Edge and Triple H. Both are great workers. Just the feud that they had the whole night they were building up to this matchup. And with Vicky Guerrero and the wedding of Edge and all that kind of stuff with Vicky and Edge making out with the wedding planner who would turn out to be Alicia Fox, a current WWE diva 6 years later, who would think that she would go from becoming a wedding planner to Divas champion to a crazy chick all these years later, maintaining a presence on television for all this time. But nevertheless, though, this contest itself, Triple H and Edge, was not about the WWE title at all. Even though it was at stake, it was all about Edge getting revenge on Triple H for ruining his wedding only days prior. So there really wasn't any reason to give any shit about the near falls in this contest. Like, if Edge was to win the championship, then who cares? You know what I mean? Because I guess JR was trying to say on commentary that Triple H's most prized possession was the WWE Championship. So for Edge to take that away from him would really kind of make the playing field even, seeing how Triple H ruined his life and ruining his wedding, and Edge taking the WWE title would ruin Triple H's wife, Stephanie. But yeah, I guess I understand that respect. I guess I understand that perspective of the contest, but it still didn't really make me care about this matchup any more than I already did, which was really not at all. I'm not saying it was a bad matchup. It was a good, like I said before, solid, if unspectacular contest, because there was really nothing about it that really had the fans, standing up and cheering. They didn't really have many near falls. They really just kind of got to the end of the contest. Out came Alicia Fox, grabbing the WWE title belt, attempting to give it to Edge, only for Vicky Guerrero to come down, clothesline of Alicia Fox, get in the ring, almost hit Triple H with the WWE title. She had shoved the referee Micah Keenan, or whatever his name is. She shoved the referee, but the commentators are saying that it was her rules, that she was a SmackDown GM, so it was okay. So I guess if you're the GM of the show, then it's okay for you to get involved in matches and not for it to be called to a DQ. I don't know. But yeah, Vicky Guerrero comes in, but before she can hit Triple H with the championship, in comes Alicia Fox. They start brawling. Edge looks to be spearing Alicia Fox, and that sounds sexual when I say it, but he looks to be spearing Alicia Fox. She moves out of the way, as does the referee. He accidentally spears Vicky Guerrero. Triple H, he capitalizes on the opportunity, hits the pedigree, 1, 2, 3, it's over. And that was pretty much it. So it felt like a really predictable contest in terms of the finish and how it was booked, and really nothing of note happening afterwards either. Triple H just kind of took his title and left. So like I said before, good wrestling, a solid matchup, and it was all about the storyline of furthering the feud between Edge and Vicky and furthering their problems, and Edge getting further pissed with Vicky and having her, I guess in a way, cost him the WWE Championship and building towards the return of The Undertaker. Like I said before, it was really a glorified filler feud for Edge before The Undertaker came back at SummerSlam, so to give him that time off and then to bring him back at SummerSlam was pretty smart. But that being said, though, this whole feud, it was entertaining with the wedding stuff, but it wasn't about the WWE Championship. So like I said before, I personally, nor did many of the viewers watching, didn't really have much of a reason to care about who would win this contest. But overall, though, I thought this was a very good show. if you compare it to the other shows of 2008, it might not be the best show on paper. I thought WrestleMania 24 was great. I thought SummerSlam was awesome. I thought One Night Stand was awesome. I thought Backlash was very good. And maybe I'm just being biased because I started watching in a way I have fond memories of that year in wrestling. But I mean, even people who didn't start watching that year can agree with me in saying that 08 was a pretty good year for WWE. They had a lot of great pay-per-views that year. This one might not be on the top of everyone's list, but you compare this to the other Great American Bash pay-per-views that I reviewed here on the channel. This is like freaking WrestleMania compared to those shows. I mean, from start to finish, like I said before, we'll do a quick recap here. Fun opening tag team title matchup. A very good contest between Shelton Benjamin and Matt Hardy for the U.S. Championship. So two very good matches in a row, both being title changes. We had the ECW title matchup, which was fine for what it was. Awesome storytelling from Chris Jericho and Shawn Michaels. Michelle McCool and Natalya with a new Divas champion being crowned in what was a good matchup in my opinion. Punk and Batista, pretty forgettable, but it wasn't absolutely atrocious. Could have been far worse. The matchup was good. Lame finish. JBL and Cena was an entertaining brawl. And then the main event was solid as well. So overall, I would give this pay-per-view a solid B or a B+. Insert your own Daniel Bryan joke here. But I mean, like I said before, 2 title changes, an inaugural Divas champion crowned, as well as this pay-per-view being the final pay-per-view held under the PG-14 banner. So in that respect, it's a pretty freaking historic show in WWE history. Would I suggest going back to watch it? Maybe if you don't have anything better to do, then you can go back and watch it. But if I had to suggest any Great American Bash pay-per-view under the WWE banner, I'm not talking about the WCW ones because those ones are far better, and WWE ruined the legacy of this event. And I'm actually kind of glad that they discontinued it because they ruined the tradition so badly of this show that it would have been an atrocity to carry on any past this point going forward. But that being said, though, of any Great American Bash pay-per-view that I've watched, 04, 05, 06, 07, and 08, from the WWE, if I had to suggest any one to any one fan, it would be this show. Like I said before in last week's video, 07 was good. It was, like I said before, great compared to the other Great American Bash pay-per-views. 04 sucked. 05 was hardly any better, and 06 was like mediocre as hell as well. So I thought this was a very good show. I enjoyed it. Maybe, like I said before, because I was watching all the old Great American Bash shows from 04, 05, 06, and 07, and I thought this was like the greatest thing I've ever seen. Not only because I started watching that year and I have fond memories of some of the stuff that was featured on this show, but because it was so much better than anything we had seen from 04, 05, 06, or 07. So like I said before, good show. It gets a thumbs up for me. Maybe not that 2 thumbs up, but I'd give it a solid thumbs up. Like I said before, solid B+. And that is going to do it for my reviews of the Great American Bash pay-per-views from the WWE right here on WrestleRant. Thank you for sticking with me through the good, the bad, and the ugly over the last number of weeks, over the course of the month of July. I will continue to review pay-per-views going into the month of August, and of course, with it being August, it marks SummerSlam, baby, the second biggest show of the year, right behind WrestleMania, so I'm looking forward to watching old SummerSlams. What years will it be? I'm not exactly sure. I kind of made a rundown of different SummerSlams that I heard were the best ones that I might want to watch. The 1991 show, 1992, 2002, maybe even watch the 08 one again. I watched that one last year, but I might want to watch it again because it was pretty great. The 2013 show, I'm obviously not going to review that one. That just happened a year ago. That'd be pretty pointless at this point in time, or at least a year later. And the 2011 show I thought was great too, so I might review that as well. But depending on what my work schedule is, I might not be able to release a new video every Tuesday like I've been doing, like I did with the last edition of WrestleRant with my review of the 07 installment of the Great American Bash. It might be up on the weekend. It might be up during the week. I'm not exactly sure. And I might watch more than a few SummerSlams. I might watch more than the bare minimum, as opposed to, watching one every Tuesday. I might watch one on the weekends and review that one as well. So I might do more than 4. So be on the lookout for that. But in any case, though, if you have any suggestions for pay-per-views you want me to watch, whether it be SummerSlam or otherwise, make sure to tweet me on Twitter at WrestleRant with your suggestion. You can find me on Facebook at Graham Jason Matthews, Bleacher Report, same thing, and YouTube, same thing. So with all that being said, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, folks. All support is greatly appreciated. I'm Graham Jason Matthews. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys next week.